Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you're local, come hang out with us one Sunday morning. Our service is at 10:30. If you're not local but looking for a good Bible teaching church, you can check out online. We stream our service. Our YouTube channel is calvary316.live. Again, the service is at 10:30. You can learn all about the church by going to calvary316.com. Today is a bit of a special episode. We're not live streaming, and this was kind of organized last minute because really a friend of Creighton, somebody that Creighton has connected with, happened to be in town, and he's got a very interesting story, at least I've been told. And it was like, hey, let's have this guy on. Let's do an interview. We'll release it later. So this is not a live version of Outlaw Radio. This happened days before. So I want to first introduce our guest. And if I butcher your last name, I think I've got it. But it's Jacob Marchlewski.
That's it.
Marchlewski.
You nailed it.
Marchlewski.
100% Marchlewski.
So presently, I want to kind of start with just a formal introduction, who you are, what you're doing, what your life looks like today.
Okay.
And then I want to rewind all the way back to the beginning. So instead of like trying to tell a story without any context to who you are, let's start with who you are, and then we'll build some context. So presently, how old are you?
Just turned 43 a couple days ago.
Tell me about your family.
I am married to my wife, Amanda. We've been married just 20 years now, actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. We have 6 kids, 5 biological kids, and 1 daughter that we're in the process of adopting. Lord willing, that will be done soon, very
Praise
soon.
the Lord, yeah.
And we live in Cihuatepeque, Honduras. I teach guitar making to adult students in Honduras, and I teach basic woodworking to young kids. That's our ministry there.
That's incredible. Like that, again, to try to unpack that in so many different levels. Like, let's start with your relationship with the Lord, because obviously you have a relationship with Jesus. That's why you're a missionary in a foreign country.
Yes, sir.
How did you get saved? Like, how did you come to know the Lord? Interestingly
enough, that's pretty tied to my guitar making. I did not grow up in a Christian family. My dad was raised in the Assemblies of God. My mom, I apologize, I misspoke. My dad was raised Catholic. My mom was raised in the Assemblies of God. When they came together, I would say going to church was not a high priority for either of them, and so it's just not something we did until I was about 15 years old. And
so you weren't even like Christmas and Easter?
Not even a Christmas and Easter kind of family.
Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Pace, Florida, Milton, around Pensacola, close to Pensacola, Florida.
Around Pensacola.
In the Panhandle. Yep.
So not much of a religious background at all?
Aside from the fact that, that area is very religious in general.
It's Bible Belt.
Exactly.
Yeah,
a lot of churches per capita. But no kind of personal relationship. No, like I said, no Christmas and Easter, just nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the age of 15. Let's pick it up kind of there.
We had a small family crisis, which ended up with my older brother attending church with a friend of his. And
now, how many siblings did you have?
I'm the middle of 3 boys.
Okay, 3 boys.
Middle of 3 boys. So my family, my parents, and actually my younger brother, started going to church with my older brother just to support him and kind of keep an eye on him, make sure
you weren't joining a cult.
Exactly,
right, yeah.
Exactly. Well, through that, their relationships with Christ were renewed, and they started going not just to keep an eye on him, but because of a genuine faith, and I just had no interest in it. I knew a lot of Christians, and I thought I knew what that was about, and I didn't want anything to do with it. To me, my point of view at that time was that, a Christian was someone who was moral or said they were at least, but, I knew enough people who were part of churches that I didn't want to be anything like, that it kind of turned me off to that.
It's like if Jesus is like that person, I don't know if I want to a whole lot to do with Jesus.
Well, I had a completely erroneous concept of what what Christianity was. I had a very just a wrong idea about what it was, having never been there.
It's sad that was the perspective, but it's in some regards justified. I mean, it's a shame at how poorly Christians represent Jesus in a large extent, and that has a powerful influence in
Right.
people's perceptions of Jesus by looking at Christians. We're supposed to reflect Christ. We never really think about the conclusions people are making of Christ by looking at us.
Right.
And that impacted you.
Absolutely. And I wish I could say, I did better. But we all do the same thing, right? I mean, none of us is immune to that. So ultimately, I started going to church because I was tired of being left at home on Sunday afternoons while my family went out to eat. And
so so your younger brother's going.
Younger brother's going.
So the whole family's going to church.
The whole family except me.
You're like, yeah, I'm not really into this.
No.
But man, Sundays are kind of boring.
And, you get tired of eating ramen after a little while. It gets old. So
I don't know. My 13-year-old, I think, could live on ramen.
Give him time.
Yeah, give him time.
He'll come around. He'll come around.
So you start going because I guess I should go.
I had nothing better to do.
And explain what then happens in your life.
I heard the gospel. Never had heard it before. Again, my idea of Christianity was right living or just being a moral person or something. I'd never been confronted with the truth of, basically my position before God. I had never heard that there's a standard to your conduct, and that standard is perfection.
Right.
And I always thought no
one's good.
Exactly.
Right.
I always thought, I'm better than this kid or that kid, and I don't do this, that, and the other. And when I finally heard, like, no, son, there's a standard that you will be judged by, and it is a standard that is impossible
Right. His name
for
is
you
Jesus.
to attain.
His name is Jesus.
But good news.
Yeah.
He died in your place if you'll accept that. I had just never understood that. So when I was 17, I came to know the Lord. Now that's a very simplistic recounting,
no doubt,
of that whole process. But I mentioned that my guitar making was kind of wrapped into that. So also when I was 17, well, now I'm going to have to back up. I'm sorry, Zach.
Go for it.
When I was 15, so I used to be a bass player. I haven't played in many years, so I can't claim that I still am.
Okay.
But I used to be a bass player.
When did you start playing bass?
14 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. And I started in the school band, and just with a very basic instrument, just a beginner instrument. And I got to the point where I felt like I needed a better instrument, but my parents' budget and my taste did not see eye to eye.
We're not the Fender Jazz wasn't in the budget.
It wasn't in the budget. But my dad was a handy guy, and he was always doing things, and he had this kind of attitude like if he didn't know how to do something, he could learn, and he was confident.
Yeah.
And I guess I know I picked a lot of that up, and I had seen a book about building guitars. And, okay, we can't spend X number $100 on this bass, but could we spend $20 on a book? Right. And he said, yeah, get the book.
Especially if you're going to self-start and maybe do something.
Right. So I got the book. We both read through it, and he said, yeah, I think we could do this. So he had never done anything like it. Obviously, I had never done anything like it. But when I was 15 years old, he and I built a 5-string electric bass in our garage, and it was an awesome time. It was an awesome time of bonding with my dad.
Now, your dad at that time is now becoming a believer, and you're at 15 still like,
yeah.
Okay.
And I'll say for my dad, I mean, it was a rekindled faith. It was something that he had grown up with, but kind of lost, I guess you would say. But
a renewal.
Yeah, you could say a renewal. I had an awesome time over several months doing that with him, and we dreamed during that process that one day we would be able to have a guitar making shop, or specifically have a music shop, with a guitar making shop in the back where I could build guitars and we could sell guitars and accessories and all this stuff. But it was just a dream.
And that dream materialized as you're building the first guitar?
Sure.
Like you had that much fun. Like it was.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome.
Like without like knowing that there's a market for this, or if you're even any good at it, it was still like this is so much fun.
I had a great time. I had a great time. You know, for me, it was an experience of creating something. Looking back, it wasn't that great, but at the time, I thought it was, you know, incredible. And just the time that I spent with my dad.
Do you still have that bass?
I do, actually. Yeah.
Is it like it's working? It's in working order.
Yeah, I mean, it lives in its case at my, right. At my dad's shop, but it's there.
So there was a dream.
Yeah.
So, explain the connection between your faith and guitar making.
So that dream just, was something that he and I had, and not something we ever thought would be a reality. And about that, in 1999, so I was 17. We were approached by my uncle, who owned a little tiny strip mall that had previously a music store in it, which was closing. And he came to my dad, not knowing anything about the stuff that we had talked about, years prior, and said, "Hey, I don't want to rent to anyone else, but there's been a music store here for the past 15 years. What would you think about going in with me and opening a music store?" And my dad was just like, "Actually,
that's not a bad idea.
That's something that's been on the radar." And that was in 1999. I believe we opened in July of that year, and he's still going strong with it now.
What's the name of the shop?
A Joyful Noise Music Store. From Psalm 100, make a joyful noise to the Lord.
And where is it located?
It's located in Milton, Florida.
In Milton, Florida.
Yep.
And so at what point did you start building guitars now for other people?
Shortly thereafter. To go back to my salvation, though, it was at that time that that I saw God's hand working in an undeniable. It was kind of ridiculous to me. It was like ridiculous for me to keep thinking that he was uninterested in me, or didn't care what happened, or it for me, seeing his hand work in ways that to me were miraculous, went just hand in hand with me surrendering my life to him. So that's how that ties together. So when I think about my guitar making, it's very closely associated with my salvation, because it just kind of happened at the same time.
You didn't apprentice to make guitars. You're completely self-taught.
Yeah.
You bought a book, and then it's like...
I bought a lot of books.
In the
end, I bought a lot of books. I actually did plan on going to a school. I even put a deposit down, which I lost. I just, when I did the math, I thought, I think at that time, this was a lot of money. It was $6,000 to go to this school. And I thought, man, for $6,000, I could make a lot of mistakes and ended up with some machinery and some tools and some, some wood, or I can spend the $6,000 and I'll probably be way ahead, but I'm going to come back with nothing. I'm not going to have any tools. I'm not going to have any materials, and that kind of stuff. So I just kind of decided to go out that way. I don't know if that was, wise or not, but that's what I did. And it worked. So
you're 17, 18 building. Now you just build bass guitars, or were you building other guitars as well?
I built bass guitars and acoustic guitars.
And acoustic guitars.
Yeah.
So big bodied, like varying sizes of acoustic guitars. What was the brand of your...
Marchluski guitars. That was, just has my namesake. Marchluski guitars.
So how long do you do that for?
I believe I did that for 7 years.
So how do we get from you're doing that for... You're in Florida building guitars under your own brand, developing a clientele following, to now you're in Honduras with 6 kids.
There's a lot of steps in between those two.
So walk me through it.
So I got married, as I mentioned, 20 years ago at 23 years old. And the guitar making was a good gig for an artist, not a great gig for a family man who has, bills that come every month. It's a difficult business to compete in because your competition are not just the professionals, but the hobbyists. There are a lot of luthiers who are not building guitars and depending on the...
You used an interesting word there. Luthiers?
Luthier is a stringed instrument builder or repair.
That's the term. Like if you were a welder or a blacksmith, a luthier.
Mm-hmm. I believe it comes from
Creighton, I learned a word today.
It's always good to learn
a
words.
luthier. I didn't even know.
Those who make lutes, the ancestor of the guitar.
So you're finding this is a highly competitive market.
It is. As I was saying, the guys who are you're competing with are not necessarily depending on this business to make a living, but they're making fantastic products. Just because they don't necessarily depend on it doesn't diminish in any way the quality that they're producing, but they're still your competition.
Right.
All that to say, it's not, for me and for where I was at the time especially, it wasn't a great way to support a family. So
you needed more money.
I started working construction.
Gotcha. So this was still a hobby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Still doing it on the side, but you're working construction.
Yeah.
So growing family.
Mm-hmm. So within.
How'd you meet your wife?
I met her at a small group at church.
And so it was a church connection.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was it love at first sight, or did you have to do a little bit of finagling?
There was definitely some finagling that happened. It was not love at first sight. My wife is a beautiful woman, and I certainly thought she was very attractive at first sight, but we didn't make that connection at first. It took a while. I remember when that connection was made. When
was it?
We had a Thanksgiving, meeting, I guess, with this group of college age students, and everyone cooked something and everyone brought something, and
you built the platter for it.
No, I think I
wooden
lent
platter.
a hand on some homemade cranberry sauce or something. It was not impressive, but she brought a couple of pecan pies, which unfortunately were a little raw in the middle, and
nice little egg taste.
Yeah. So
I'm glad you called it pecan pie and not pecans.
No, I'm from the South.
Yeah, because that's just sacrilegious.
So she was sitting on the couch, and casually, I had been okay.
You're like, hon, this pie's terrible, and
no,
she loves it.
I
She fell
said,
over.
she was. I'm gonna, for lack of a better term, I'm gonna say she was sulking about her pies because she was disappointed. And I had been talking with a friend of mine about self-pity. And just how it's really just another cloaked form of pride, because it's still all just about me, isn't it? It's all about how this is affecting me. And so I thought the Christian brotherly thing to do was to share that with her. And she listened.
I'm sure that worked out great.
Well, we've been married for 20 years.
There you go.
She did not.
Get off the couch, woman.
Right. She did not
do away
take
with your
that,
self-pity.
She listened quietly. Okay. And then she the next opportunity she had, she reprimanded me for that. And at that point, that's when I thought, wow, this is a strong woman.
There you go.
That's what turned my radar on to her.
So you guys got married, started having kids. You're working construction, building guitars, going to church, living in Florida still.
Yes,
it's all Florida.
Pensacola, yeah.
Pensacola, and so Honduras. Like, how did that even?
Yeah.
Like, so the guy that's in the wide shot sitting behind you, Mr. Snipes over here, who's making noises and all kinds of tomfoolery taking place back there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I know kind of his, like, he had a history of doing short-term mission trips, and him and his wife both had a heart for the country, and
right.
and that kind of developed over time. How did this work for you?
I had the opportunity in 2008 to go on a short-term trip. Another friend of mine had gone on a previous trip, and we had a connection with a guy who had been sent out from our church, the church that we attended there. He and his wife had been in Honduras for a while, and we're hosting teams. And this friend of mine came back and was telling me all about his experience, and I thought, man, I never experienced anything like that. I've never been outside of the country. I've never seen the church operate in a different context. I've never seen any of this stuff. I think I'd like to experience that. Would there be?
For sure.
room on the next trip? And he's like, absolutely. And so I went, I think for 10 days in 2008. And I will say it was a paradigm shifting experience for me because.
Did your wife go with you, or was
no,
this just you?
Just me.
Okay.
Just me. And not really something at the time that my wife was very interested in pursuing. She was happy that I was able to.
So this was an internal stirring in your own heart.
Yeah.
Got you there, paradigm shift.
Yeah.
How so?
I had people ask me when I came back, describing the situation there. There's a lot of poverty there. There's a lot of struggle there. And people said, I guess that makes you thankful for what you have, doesn't it? And I thought, maybe, I don't know. I think it's more that I realized I don't need all these things around me to make me, to make me secure, to make me happy. These people seemed way more happy than I was, with all of my belongings or all of my conveniences or all of, all the things that I enjoy, yet they seem happier.
It's a glimpse outside of the materialistic culture that we were inundated with in America.
Exactly. So I kind of just, kept that in my heart. And it's not something I thought we would ever do, as a family or anything. It really just was not on the radar. However, a couple of years later, several years later, I was working construction. I'd just kind of fallen into a routine of just survival.
So about how long was this after your missions experience?
It would have been, it was five years after.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it wasn't like you got back from your first mission trip and you're like, honey, pack up the Winnebago. We're going to Honduras.
No, not at all.
Had you been back?
Nope.
So it just like the Lord did something in this and you kind of, it stewed, marinated, percolated.
It was something
for 5 years
going on in the background.
Yeah.
It was not like this growing thing where I'm, I feel like we should move to Honduras. It wasn't anything like that. Actually, we were getting ready to make a move to North Carolina, and I was on a waiting list to be enrolled in a gunsmithing program.
Okay.
And, there's a lot of other things surrounding that, but it boiled down to what do I feel like is best for my family and my future, my comfort, my advancement, and it was just me. And I think Amanda, my wife, was at the bookstore and saw a book on the shelf, and I think it was on clearance, a book by David Platt called Follow Me. And I had read Radical, years prior to that.
Yeah, I have opinions. I did an episode on that book.
Right. For me, It was the main takeaway for me from the book Follow Me was like, why are you making the decisions that you're making? Why are you doing the things you're doing? Is it because it's a good idea for you and this is what you feel is best for you? All things that spoke to me at the time.
Yeah.
And the challenge there was, have you considered like asking God what he wants you to do?
Novel idea, right?
And I was like, no, actually I hadn't really thought about that. And so we did. We just started asking, Lord, we've got all these plans. We're making steps to do something that we think is a good idea. What would you have us do? And at that time, we felt like he laid on our hearts to go and serve in Honduras.
Now, your wife had not been there yet.
Never had been there, no. And so we took a trip in 2013. So that was, 5 years after I had been. I guess, most people call it like a vision trip, just to see. I don't know. I don't know what we expected to see. When we came back.
Hondurans.
Yes, that we did.
You
we
would see Hondurans.
Yes. But for me, it was, I guess it recalled some of those feelings that I had in 2000.
It had been 5 years. I mean, you kind of need to check that for a moment.
And she was surprisingly open to continue talking about that. And we just started praying. We started talking to friends.
What does your family look like at that point?
We had 4 kids at that point.
And their ages would be, they were young.
Yeah, so 7, 5, 3, and 1.
So this is not just like a decision for you. It's also a decision for your wife. And then there's ramifications of 4 little ones. And
Yes.
like, Lord, what are you really doing here? What does this look like?
Yeah.
So at some point, it was like, we're doing this, right? I mean, there was
After
a moment.
There was a progression. There were steps in that direction until I was, it was like finally confirmed. It was more like, okay, Lord, I don't really know that you want us to do this. However, we think you might be. So I'm going to step one step in faith and do the next step. And if you don't let us fall here and you continue to, make a way for us to pursue this, we will pursue it until you say, no, this is not.
So you close the door.
Right. And it was the opposite. There were confirmation after confirmation. There was, he provided abundantly for us in all ways, in preparation. Of course, it's time of fundraising to do that because, I'm a teacher, but I don't get paid by the people that I teach. We're supported by people who share the vision that we have for our ministry from the States.
Let me take one step back.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you mentioned what you're currently doing in Honduras. You're teaching people how to make a living by making these
Mm-hmm.
instruments, self-sufficiency, all the things that come with that. Was that, because at the time that's just your hobby,
Right.
working construction. You're thinking about maybe going and getting into the gun creation business. Obviously, you're very handy. You
Say so.
You've got a knack for working with your hands and creating things, which is its own gift. With Honduras, so explain to me like how, okay, I've got this little itch. I go, this is a paradigm shift. I'm letting that stew for 5 years. Like, we're not acting rashly here, but just the Lord keeps pushing, keeps moving. We where do you get to the fact it's like, okay, Lord, if you're calling me to Honduras, cool. To do what? Like how did that tie together?
So, when you're confronted with a potential major move like that, like, the things are about to change, you start to think like, well, I guess we can teach, we can teach practical skills. I know how to do a lot of things. I know how to weld, and I know woodworking, and I know construction, and I know all of these things. And my wife is, very, very capable with a lot of hands-on stuff as well. I mean, she bakes, and she makes soap, and she does all of. She is very capable in a lot of different skills.
Not real good at pie making.
No, she is actually very good at pie making.
So
That was an anomaly. Even for then,
it was an outlier.
Yes, before then, and after that. I mean, she's quite good. So Kenneth can attest.
No, no softness in the middle. That's not that's cooked through these days.
I'm convinced now that was from the Lord to bring us together.
The Lord used her self-pity.
That's right.
So, but how do you get into the like, hey, I'm going to go to Honduras and teach people how to make guitars?
So, yeah, this is the interesting part of that. As we started to raise, funds, tell people about what we were thinking about doing, that's kind of the narrative we use. We think we're going to go, we'll probably open like a trade school or something like that. And that's the idea that we were operating on. And when it came down to it, because of the contact we had, this friend of ours who was living there, the same guy that I took a trip with in 2008, contacted him, and he said he put us in contact with his mission agency. We went through the orientation, we did all of these things, and then as we're getting closer, he said, "Well, you're going to come work with me." I said, "What? Doing what?" Well, they had a coffee ministry. And they build houses and stuff, sell the coffee in the States, use those funds to provide housing. And I just said, okay, I guess that's what we'll do.
Step one.
Yeah. We spent almost a year in language school. So while we were doing the ministry, really our first job was to learn Spanish. And then we started working with him. I led the construction of houses. That's what I did. I didn't do anything with guitars or carpentry in that sense.
Right. So you're learning, but in the process of that, you're learning how it all works.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is, again, is very different in the third world than it is in America. Again, we have the luxury of Home Depot and Lowe's and Ace Hardware, where you need something, it's just a few miles down the road, you go pick it up, you're good to go. But like, you're in a totally different world, different environment, different pace, different material set. So you have to learn that. There's a learning curve to that.
Absolutely, there is.
So then how do you go from building houses? How long did you do that? Just as
a couple of years.
So,
officially a couple of years. And then I continued to do that even after I was doing, the guitar making on an as needed basis.
What was the heart behind the guitar making?
So, well, before I get to that, I'll say we did that for a couple of years. And then for really for financial reasons, we had to do something else. And we started working with another ministry that does orphan care, essentially. They were trying to start a foster care program in Honduras. And that, incidentally, also is how we came to be in the process of adoption. Our foster child has lived with us, excuse me, for nearly 9 years. And we're getting close to the end of that adoption process. So the guitars. I was approached out of the blue about building guitars by a couple of Honduran professors.
Were these people that had found out that you had this particular trade, or like they didn't even know?
No, they had no idea. There's an older gentleman, our friend Wyatt, who's been in Cihuatepec. He's been in Honduras for, I think, 45 years, something like that. And in the early 80s, late 70s, he built a few guitars because he's a music teacher. And one of his ex-students works at the university and knows a couple of professors who had a dream for years to start a guitar making course, essentially, at the university, but had no one to teach it. And he caught wind of that and said, hey, I know a guy who builds guitars. He's, my old teacher, Wyatt. And so they got in touch with him, and he said, no, I can't do that. But I know a real guitar maker.
Right.
Who actually lives in Cihuatepec as well. And so he called me and said, I've got these guys who are from the university who want to start a guitar making program. Would you be interested in talking to them? So we were in the States at that time for a short visit. When I came back, I met with them. And it was basically like, we have all this incredible wood in Honduras that the entire world uses to build guitars, but we don't build guitars here. We don't have any sort of tradition of guitar building.
Interesting.
It is very interesting.
Why is that, you think?
I don't really know. I say there is no tradition of guitar making. That's not entirely true. In the prison system, there is a tradition of guitar making in Honduras. Pretty, basic quality instruments. There had been no tradition of making instruments that were worthy of the wood that was being used, if that makes sense.
No,
Honduras
does, yeah.
produces incredible wood, and it's used by most major guitar manufacturers. Honduran mahogany is considered by most to be some of the best in the world. And that's why you find it in so many guitars.
What makes it so preferable?
It's light, stable, easy to work, sonorous. It's just
handles moisture.
It's very stable as far as wood goes. So, but yeah, they approached me. I didn't go looking for a guitar making gig in Honduras. They said, "Hey, would you be interested in teaching this?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I know something about guitar making. So started with those guys, and it morphed into what it is now.
So what is it now?
We have basically a small, I call it a aula taller. It's a classroom workshop. So they learn by doing. It's a hands-on. It's very much hands-on. We, over the past several years, I've kind of developed a system, an approach. Most of the guys coming in have no experience with tools. And so they have to learn how to sharpen. This is the step one. They have to learn how to sharpen. And then we start with a very simple project. And now it's a project that has nothing to do with guitars. It's just a woodworking project.
You say we.
When I started out, I was giving all of the instruction. I was giving all of the, just everything, leading all of these
guys. Start to finish.
And it's such an intensive process. And because it's not a classroom setting in the traditional sense where we're all on the same page, we're all working on the same project, we're all at the same step. People enter at different times, they leave at different times. They come, some guys come most days of the week. Some guys come one day a week. Some guys come just the weekend. So it's very difficult to maintain everyone on the same page without holding people back. So because of that, I was having to give input at every step with every student. And
it becomes difficult.
It becomes quite difficult. And so
especially if you're adding students and you're growing a program, that becomes virtually impossible.
Yes. So what we moved into out of necessity is that I would just start asking my students who had more experience to help the students that were coming in and just starting with tasks that they were more than capable of teaching. And
it's a mentoring mentors approach.
It is. And I would like to say it was, just a stroke of genius, but it wasn't. It was very much a necessity. I could not do it on my own. And that's kind of the form of the classes that we've maintained. I don't do a ton with the students when they first come in because someone else is in charge of that. One of my older students.
It's the elementary steps. So it's you don't need to be doing that. It's easier to delegate those students.
Exactly.
Where's the, so if I take a step back, it's like, okay, this guy's a missionary to Honduras. He's building guitars. I see the practical value of teaching a trade, et cetera, et cetera. Where does the ministry component come into what you're doing?
Yeah, we just sneak it right in there. Actually, it's not very sneaky. We just start our classes with a devotional. Yeah. Especially with the kids who, we have a group of, this year I think we'll have 13. We've had as many as 20 kids at a time, in a class, which Kenneth helps me with whenever he can, and he can back me up. He
runs off the weak students.
It's quite a challenge, but it's awesome. And we
know working with Kenneth is a challenge.
I would never say that to him.
No, that's
directly.
Fine. I did. Yeah, and I did it right to his face.
Right. So we just start the classes with a devotional.
So you're using a very practical thing. Mm-hmm. It's not like, hey, we're running woodworking VBS. It's we're teaching a skill, we're mentoring, we're teaching a trade. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, ultimately that's the idea, is like we're going to create a generation of creative Honduran guitar makers. Yeah. Utilizing our own natural resources. But in doing that, it's relational building from the goal of like, we're going to also see a lot of Christian guitar makers.
That is certainly the hope. And with my adult students, it's a little more organic. And I'm not sure if this is a good thing or not, but I spend more time with some of my students than I spend with my family, in the waking hours. And so, we just have those conversations. I hope that they see not just through the words that I use, but through the way that I treat them, the way that I treat other people, the way that I handle myself, the way that I live, that what I'm saying is reinforced, what I'm saying about Christ, what I'm saying about the gospel, what I'm saying about, our standing before God with or without him, that is reinforced by the life that I'm then living with them. That's my hope there. Anything that's happened through our ministry, obviously would be foolish to take credit for, but I've seen the Lord working, in my young students, in my older students. And we're just there, we're just there doing what we know to do today. If God puts this person or this thing, in front of us and says, speak, help, teach, whatever, that's what we're going to do.
Have you had anybody reach out about, because you were a known guitar maker. Have you ever had anybody reach out about, I've actually found a few forums where people are like, hey, I had this guitar. Does this guy still make guitars? Where did he go? He's like dropped off the face of the earth.
Right.
Have you had anybody reach out to you? Has your story been known by others? Not really. Not in any meaningful way. Not in any grand way. No. You haven't had like Victor Wooten reach out and be like, hey, I need a bass guitar.
No, I'm still waiting on that call.
You're still waiting on that call. How do you build a bass guitar?
With a lot of patience. What's
the optimal wood to build a bass guitar?
There isn't one. There isn't an optimal wood. It's in electric guitars, so much of it is style and weight. There are things that affect the playability, obviously, just the width of the neck, the shape of the neck, and the scale length, and all of these things. But the wood plays a much smaller role in an electric instrument than it does in an acoustic instrument.
It's huge. It's everything to an acoustic instrument.
It's everything. Well, it's not everything, but it's a huge part of it. The construction of the instrument can be manipulated in such a way as to, enhance certain qualities that the wood would give, or to, suppress, I guess you would say, certain qualities that the wood would naturally give the guitar. But the wood is a lot of the equation in an acoustic instrument.
You've already mentioned mahogany as being probably the is that your favorite to work with, or what's your...
I certainly like working with mahogany simply because it's easy to work. It's stable. It does all the things that you would just want it to do and expect it to do. It's not my favorite from a creative standpoint because while it is beautiful, it's not extravagant. I love crazy looking wood.
What's your favorite then?
I think currently my current favorite of the woods that I have available to me is the Honduran rosewood. We were donated some essentially root sections, like the very base of some trees that had been cut like 20 years ago, and they were donated to the shop and cut into them, and they were just stunning wood. And we've built a few guitars, very special guitars with that wood. I would have to say currently that's my favorite.
So where are you getting like your resources? Like, are you guys, hey, it's Saturday, let's go out into the forest and cut down some trees? Like,
no, unfortunately you cannot do that.
Right. I didn't think so.
In Honduras. The laws regarding, trees and forestry products in general are very, very strict. We were very fortunate to have a friend who was a forestry engineer who helped us with contacts, who helped us, procure different woods. Unfortunately, he passed away very recently. But we owe the vast majority of the wood that we were able to obtain to his help. He was just excited about the project and wanted to help, and
was your supplier.
He was our supplier. Yeah.
So, bringing our conversation kind of to a close, to the young man, the young woman that maybe, okay, two questions. Maybe they have, they've never been on a mission trip before, and they hear this and they're like, maybe there's a little stirring that happens. Speak to that person. Like, what would you say?
Oh, I would say you should definitely do it. I can't think of a single reason why you shouldn't. Don't, if you go on that mission trip, expect for the impact to be on yourself.
Yes.
You are going to go. You're going to help people. I don't know what you're going to be involved in. Maybe you're going to, do help with a feeding program, or with a VBS, or with a, community outreach,
right,
orphanage, whatever it may be. That's fantastic. I think that's great. I believe, from my own experience and from talking to so many other people, that the main point of impact is going to be on your life, as it was with me. We went on the short-term trip that I went on in 2008, we built a bridge. We built a bridge, and we poured some concrete floors in people's houses, and everyone was very thankful. And yes, we made an impact, but it pales in comparison to the impact that was made in my life.
Yes.
And so, go and see something different. Have a heart to serve, but realize that the impact is going to be primarily in your life. And that's, as far as I can tell, that is the best outcome that you can.
And I would add to that, like, don't think because you go on a short-term mission trip that you are going to be a missionary.
No.
It's like it's totally okay. Like, my mom had years ago had a call for full-time missions, and then she met my dad, and the Lord changed that, and she's been a pastor's wife for almost 45 years. Right. But as often as she can, she goes on short-term mission trips. Like, there is, like, you can have a heart for missions, but that doesn't mean like you got to sell everything and move to another country and set up shop. Like, there's an impact to just going for a week. And
absolutely.
I think every high school graduate in America should go overseas to the third world for at least 2 weeks, whether it's missions or it's Peace Corps,
right? Because
it changes your perspective of really the culture that you live in.
It does in a major way.
Second question. Because I keep coming back in my mind to this part of your story where it's like you went on a trip, there was a stirring,
mm-hmm.
and it was 5 years later.
Yeah. So
I want you to give some counsel, some advice. If there's somebody watching, and they have felt that stirring, they similar experience. They went on a short-term mission trip, and there's this thing that's just in the back of their head, and they're maybe afraid of the ramifications. They're worried about what that might look like. There's a bit of fears. There's some trepidation. Maybe there's even self-doubt. Am I really hearing from God? Is this really what I should do? Can you speak to that person? Can you provide just an exhortation to that person?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's your story.
Yeah.
And I don't think you've regretted it for a minute. Maybe there have been times, I'll reverse that. Anybody in ministry, there are times where you're like, what am I doing?
Right.
That's true. But deep within your soul, you're like, I know what I'm doing.
Right.
I know what I'm doing.
I would say to the person who thinks they may, who has been stirred by an experience like that, and maybe wants to potentially pursue missions or any type of ministry, but has self-doubt. I would just say, let's remember that it is not our own. It's not us. We are not capable of doing what the Lord has called us to do of our own, of our own merit, of our own strength, of our own intelligence. It's Him who makes us capable for whatever work He's given us to do. If He's called you to do something, He's going to, He will do in you what needs to be done for you to accomplish that thing. And it may not be the grand idea that you have that you're going to accomplish. In fact, I can almost guarantee that it won't be. But something, He is going to use you. If He's called you, if He called me to go to Honduras, and I had grand ideas about what was going to happen. We're going to impact this nation. We haven't. I'm sorry. We've been there 10 years. We haven't impacted the nation of Honduras, but what we've impacted the lives of some individuals.
Yeah.
And we've been impacted incredibly. And that's okay. God sent us there. He has sustained us for 10 years through difficult times. And he's done the work that He wanted to do in and through us. In that time. So to that person, I would say, don't get too hung up on yourself. Just be obedient. And to the person who's convinced they want to go and it's just not happening, they either don't see a way that it's going to happen, or they're anxious to start. Just be patient.
Be patient.
Let me pull one from my own book. We've been in a process of adoption for 8 years.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys have experienced something similar. It is very difficult to maintain patience in something like that, but God has a reason that it's taken this long.
Jessica and I have been trying to adopt Creighton for about 30 years, and we're still in the process. It's the paperwork.
It is. It's difficult.
Ridiculous.
It's difficult. If it's taking a long time by your account, it's for a good reason. You don't have to know what that is. You may never know what it is. Maybe you'll get a glimpse of why. Oh, wow.
Right.
If we had moved, at this time, X, Y, and Z wouldn't have happened, or, it would have been an absolute disaster. But God in His sovereignty made it take as long as it took, because He's good and He's wise and He knows what He's doing.
He knows more than us.
He knows way more than us.
I guess the takeaway I got is, first, what's the old saying? God doesn't always call the equipped, but He always equips the called.
Absolutely.
And that, and then secondly is, it's all ministry, even setting ministry aside, your relationship with Jesus in general is a venture of faith. And again, I think it's fascinating just with your story. You had this skill set, this very unique skill set. But you went and you were building houses.
Yeah.
And you didn't go down to create a guitar, building apprenticeship type program, but that's what the Lord sent you down there and led you through the winding path to get there, right?
I'll say this. I was talking to a friend of mine when we were raising funds, and I said, we're going to go. I know all these. I know how to do these things. I know how to do construction and woodworking, welding, and all that. And he said, yeah, okay. I hear you. I hear you. He said, but I think God is going to use you in your weakness. I think that's what He's going to do. And man,
that's how He gets the glory, right?
Yeah. If Jacob goes down there and says, I'm well equipped for this, and I have, that's on me. He will use you in your weakness. I have seen it. I can attest to it. So yeah.
Listen, I so appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that this happened. It was last minute. You actually flew up here to help Kenneth get a truck. Y'all are going to be driving back down to Honduras. You're thinking how long the trip's going to take? About a week?
Yep.
6-7 days. Yeah.
Yep.
6 or 7 days, Lord willing, right?
Yeah.
Well, Godspeed. May He bless you guys. And at Outlaw Radio, we'll be praying for your daughter and for the adoption. And, you said you're at the you can almost see the light at the end of the tunnel, and praise the Lord for that. And we'll be praying that you cross the finish line.
Appreciate
here
that.
soon. Yes.
Appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, the Outlaw Radio Show. You can check out all of our episodes by going to outlawradio.live. That is our YouTube channel. If you liked this episode, you can go back into the archive and check out all previous episodes. They're all cataloged. And also should mention that while you might be watching the video, all Outlaw Radio episodes are podcasted. The audio is podcasted. Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasting. So thanks for joining us. God bless.